Hello, and thank you for joining me, not on Tuesday night, but on Wednesday, and I have to keep it straight, for this week's edition of Inside the Process. We started this last week, and I think it's going to work. I mean, I'm comfortable with what's going on here, and, well, to an extent anyway, it's still uncharted turf, although this is a continuation of Pandemic Piano that we're doing on the mainstay page. Excuse me 1 second, I realized I forgot one little thing, and that will fix that. So I'm going to take you into my world. Some of these will be more technically or physically about playing the piano. Others of them will be about the process or the experiences, or even specific stories and accounts of my own. I decided to put a topic up this week, and I did for last week's video after the fact, because I kind of don't know exactly what I'm going to do, even though I do map it out, and I don't know if the idea of a specific topic is good or bad when someone's looking at this. But you'll see that underneath, if I did this correctly, the link to the support page of my website. Thank you so much to all of you who do support me via the PayPal tip link, or on Patreon, or through the mail. And those options are explained and detailed to you on the support page. Look around the website if you wish once you're there. One very exciting thing is that last night I got to spend the better part of an hour updating the website and putting gigs on there. Now, most of them are still live streams, but they're picking up too, and part of this is that the projects that I've been working with for months now are starting to come to fruition, and you're seeing some of them reflected on the performance schedule. Other things are going to happen. So, yeah. So here we go. So I'm having a room built onto my house, which means that I have more opportunity than usual to stand outside and have a conversation with a construction guy, actually the contractor who shows up and oversees the work. At least at this point in my life. I used to live next door to one, and we would have interesting discussions. These are different interesting discussions. So he and I were talking in my front yard, and the subject was old school stuff. Old school, not meaning where you go to school, but I mean the way things were that we knew versus the way things are now. You know, and if I can use the phrase "hell in a handbasket," you know, it occurred to me when I was younger and my kids were small, that I had to really look at that and say, yeah, I feel that if the world were the way it was when I grew up, you know, like you couldn't have an instant message, you had to write a letter and you had to wait, and that built character, you know, and all that stuff. And if the world were just like that, then the kids would be better off, and I finally had to kind of succumb and say, but that's not the world the kids are growing up in, and this is the world they have to navigate. So things are just the way they're supposed to be, and every generation has felt like that. Now, this isn't so much about values, but it kind of is. And I'm going to leave it there with, like, you know, old school versus whatever has replaced it. And we're going to go on from there. no, we weren't really talking about religion. So that was meant more, not exactly tongue-in-cheek. But it's not just about old school and new school either. But that was a way to get me in, and I hope the connection will make sense. And what we really talked about was the attitude that people have these days, particularly young people, not to a person, but just in general, and there are certainly plenty of exceptions to this, but the attitude in general that many young people have toward work. You know, and the idea that the work has become, and it's always been this, you know, at some level, you know, all the time, but it's become more of an entitlement and less of a responsibility. You know, to some, more about, you know, showing up in order to get your paycheck and chasing that rather than taking pride in your work. You know, and this contractor, he's my age, roughly, you know, maybe a couple of years older, and he certainly wanted to take pride in his work, and when people who are working with him or for him don't take pride in their work, well, that's a bit of a soreness on his thumb, so to speak. And I can see entirely through those lenses because of my life experience, because I've been, in general terms, a contractor or a gig worker my entire life. So the only thing I know is to hustle, and I'm going to say that in quotes because there's all kind of ways to hustle. You know, I got to hustle my gigs all the time, you know, but the best way to ensure that you get to keep working is to do a good job when you do work, right? So the way I've always said is, my perspective is that I need to do a good job today, and that's my job security to have a job tomorrow. And but that's the only life I know, and that colors me. But it's a life that I chose. There have been a few brief exceptions where I've been an employee, never full time, but you know, in addition to things. But with just one exception, they were all related to music. Like when I was worship arts director, is the title we finally landed on for the Chestertown Church of the Nazarene, the last church position I had, which was like now 15 years ago. And that was part-time, and that was, of course, related to music. But I'm still always going to consider myself a full-time musician. The one job I had for 3 months that wasn't related to music was when I was 19 years old, and I got it by accident-ish. And it was preparing taxes for H&R Block, if you can believe that. And how that happened was that I was encouraged, and it made sense. I was advised, encouraged to go to tax preparation school because I was going to be self-employed and I should learn to do my own taxes. And what I didn't realize when I went to the H&R Block little tax training thing that they offered, you know, every year, was that was actually the training that you go to in order to learn to prepare taxes for them. So I get done the thing, I say thank you very much, and they say, okay, here's your work schedule. And I said, what? But I did it, and I proved to myself then, if I didn't know it already, but I certainly know it now, I'm not cut out to be an employee. Or I have a friend of mine who's self-employed, musician friend. It wouldn't hurt to say his name, but because I'm going to talk about him slightly, I won't. But you know, he and I will have discussions, and I'll just look at him and say, you know, there's a reason we're both self-employed, and we'll get a little smile out of that. So H&R Block becomes a little relevant. I guess Jackson Hewitt may be big now, and my daughter works for them part-time in tax season. Because it's about that time, although all that's fuzzy at this point and the goalposts keep moving and the dates keep changing. But about this time of year, particularly when I would do the senior programming, if you watched last week, that will become a theme, you know, at some point. And I always had my song I would play dedicated to the IRS for tax season. And here it is. go. You took the part that once was my life savings, and now why not take all of me? All right, that's all I want to talk about, taxes. Oh my goodness. So, just going back into my, past and my upbringing, when I was 17 years old and got my driver's license, which was the age in New Jersey, immediately I used that driver's license in order to allow myself to make money, because I could drive to gigs, and because I was in high school, living at home with my parents, and it wasn't conducive to teach piano there, I could quickly build up a piano teaching business by going to homes. So I would advertise, and it was also a way to make it happen quickly. So it was a deliberate kind of business decision too, not to teach in the studio, but to drive to homes. And I think at one point I may have had like 30 students, and it was a thing. And it faded pretty quickly, but it was, it always was there, but it wasn't as big as it was in the initial years. But that just kind of allowed me to get going. But at the same time that I was starting that when I was 17, I was keeping my paper routes. so because when you're younger, back in that day, and those of you old enough to remember will remember paper routes, and that was the way to make money when you were a kid. And if you did a paper route or you remember them, you know the deal. The kid. I guess I started when I was 11 or 12. And actually worked for 2 competing newspapers at one point. The South Jersey paper and one of the Philadelphia papers. Anyhow, what you would do is you would go to the person's house who was the drop-off point, and you would get your papers, and you have to go back there once a week, I think on a Friday night, and you'd have to kind of square up. You have to reconcile, and you'd have a pocket full of money because you went and you collected that day. And I'm sure there were people who organized their bills really neatly, and maybe even had a little change purse or something. And of course, me, just stuffed in my pocket, right? So I come out of there and I just grab things and I count out, this is for you and this is for me, and I walk out with cash, right? And I realized, preparing for this, that was actually setting the template for me having this gig worker mentality. The idea that, income is continuous cash flow. It's cash flow like it's out the door before it comes in, but it's still continuous cash flow. And I've never really had the situation that probably you and most normal people have, where, you get paid once a week at max, or every 2 weeks, or even once a month, and then you budget it out and you stretch your money and, and all that. It just comes in, goes out, goes in, goes out. That's in my whole life. And so that was in place, but there's another layer, and this is kind of where I'm going ultimately with this. And that layer was that I was involved in playing music that was a couple of generations older than I was. And music is a cultural thing. A friend of mine is known to say, music is a metaphor that depicts the human experience as defined by culture. And we will save the discussion of that for another time. But yeah, music is a universal language, but really music is a cultural expression. And not just between different, countries or even different centuries, but just different generations. Even 5 or 10 years can change the musical landscape. And that's part of the, parents and the kids oftentimes, what the music they're listening to. And of course, the parents that are saying that today, when they were kids, their parents were saying that about them, and probably the generation before that. So I'm a teenager in the 1970s, and I'm playing music from the 20s and 30s, right? And starting to gig in that realm. And at that point, Joe and Paul Mediri and I were playing together all the time. We kind of taught each other that stuff, and we even had our own little Benny Goodman Trio inspired group. And what we found, and this was every single time somebody would refer us, or we would make a new contact, and it would come back, oh, they're kids. Oh, they don't know what we do. They're rock and roll kids. What do they know? And we kind of, at first, had to pretty much audition every time. And it wasn't like a long audition. It was like you get a few notes in, and it's like, oh, he's okay. He's one of us. Hey, kid, you're in. Okay, kid. I mean, it always went like that, but there's always this suspicion. And that proving ourselves. Also, I realized in preparing this, or actually just now, that was also really helpful to me, because that was another layer that if I were playing the music of my own generation at the time, I would have skipped that. But that just added a layer of prove your worth, and I'll keep coming back to it, and I've said this for a long time, that every day is an opportunity to prove yourself so that you can work the next day. And so here I am as a teenager in the 1970s, coming up influenced by the later stride pianists, particularly Fats Waller in this case. So I'm going to play just a little bit of what I would play then. I mean, this is what I can play now too. But just for the little contrast, the older guys, and these would have been guys who played with the big bands and were part of that era. So they were delighted to see a 17-year-old kid doing something like this. callers ain't misbehaving. And I realize I should mention, although I have my what's this thing called? Tablet up here. I don't have the stream open. If you happen to leave a comment, I'm not going to see it until afterward, and I will answer it. But I did run into a little trouble last week, and if you're watching, you know I did it as an experiment to connect with my Wi-Fi here. And it's a damp, drippy evening anyway. It's going to challenge my Wi-Fi internet to begin with, so I have to turn all my other internet connections off. So if you're leaving a comment, I will find it later. All right. So here's actually like the meat and potatoes now. I'm working up to this. And this is a story from my experience that some of you have heard me tell. And I told some of this on the Mainstay Facebook page, The Pandemic Piano, and I've recounted this a lot in person. But if you've heard me tell the story, especially on the Mainstay stream, hang in there because I'm going to extend the story. I was a little hesitant to then, but it's going to work now. And I'm going to leave out all the preliminaries of it and just get right to the point for this. The preliminaries were that in 1992 or three, four, anyway, early 1990s, I all of a sudden, with no warning and not suspecting it would happen, found myself offered a music therapy contract to come once a week to a facility in Delaware. And it had to do with me coming in doing an entertainment program. And the first entertainment program I ever did for seniors. And that came out of working at the Showboat in Atlantic City and playing for seniors there. And of course this was in the 90s, so the kind of stuff that I was playing was like right in the bullseye, right? And I'll talk more about that later because there were some really important things I learned from all those things. But the first time I came to do an entertainment program, it just happened to be that they had lost their contracted music therapist. The activity person saw that I was able to relate to the residents in the appropriate way. Didn't even ask me if I was a music therapist. She said, "Okay, I see what you're doing. I like it. We need this. I want to offer you a little contract. Come once a week." And away, And I go through the whole objection that I don't know about music therapy. I did a research paper in college, but I don't want to get too far off of this. But she just said, "No, you've got the instincts. You know what to do. You'll be able to learn." And that was, the first little step to push me in a direction. And I accepted the contract, not primarily because I wanted the money. I accepted the contract because I was just being offered an opportunity to learn about something. And I quickly realized that it was just a natural extension of my outlook to begin with. So that was the beginning of the long process, which eventually, not that long, but not that short either, to lead me to become certified as a music therapist. But here's the point. I'm sitting in her office, and this is all the day that I go there. So this is all like new, brand new. And I finally say, okay. And I don't know if I physically signed the contract or not, but here is the real curveball, where she said to me, "All right, now that you're going to work here, you need to know something I couldn't tell you before, and you can't tell anybody. Only people who work here can know." And I'm like, oh, what's this? And what I come to find out was that Cab Calloway was a resident of that facility. Cab Calloway had a stroke, and the family purposed to make sure that the media would not find out where he was, so there would be no opportunity for like photographers lurking about or trying to get a picture of him at that point. And they succeeded, and so the media was looking for him somewhere else, and here he was in this facility in Delaware. Now, the idea of playing music for Cab Calloway with Cab Calloway in the room did not concern me at all. Just because, even though it wasn't Cab Calloway, it was all these other musicians from that era. These guys I'm playing with. I already understood that was my tribe, But the thing that really weirded me out was that I didn't know what I was doing as a music therapist. I had to figure this out as I went along. And I may have said aloud, I said, well, I already don't know what I'm doing as a music therapist. Why do I have to not know what I'm doing in front of Cab Calloway? That was what was weirding me out, right? But the next week, did I want to play something? No. Okay. The next week, I had my contract, and I was actually I was hoping I didn't see him actually, and I did my thing. I was told where to go, and I played, and I didn't see him, and I was like, phew! I dodged that bullet, and as I'm preparing to leave, the director said, "Okay, let's go upstairs for your second one." I said, "What?" And I didn't even know I was doing two. So like, oh good. And so I go upstairs, and then they wheeled him in. And that was a remarkable nonverbal exchange. It didn't speak to me in terms of like, my own ability or prowess or anything like that. It spoke to me about, I guess I used the word, the tribe, right? And it was exactly the same experience that I had with every other older musician who needed to like see or hear for themselves that I was actually one of them. So they wheel him in, and I'm playing the tunes. There's one thing about playing the older tunes, and it's another thing about playing them the way they were played. And since that's all I listened to, I mean, all the records I listened to, I was there. And he couldn't speak, and but he was really listening intently. I could tell. And then at one point, kind of early on, damn, it was like the floodlights got turned on, and I got this giant smile from him. And I knew what it meant. I meant, okay, kid, all right, and that became kind of representative to me. This is a little off the subject, but not really, of what, actually it's right on the subject. It became representative to me about what was happening every time I went to a new senior facility. Because I didn't really think of it, but the experience with the older musicians wasn't really different from the other people in general. I had to come across as credible, and I had to, and of course once you make the connection is open. But like, because of the age thing, right? I had to like prove myself, and then I was in. Now, that's a whole nother thread that I'm going to talk about at some point. But I'm going to continue with the Cab Calloway story because it's incredibly special. And now this is a little off the subject, but I want to share this. So first of all, I was okay. I didn't say this part. That was actually the last week of his life, and he had passed away before I came the next week. So I only saw him one time, and of course that was something I pondered on and reflected on, a lot. And so I was on a gig, a Madeira Brothers gig, a big band gig, back when the big bands were working, right? This was in the 90s, and on a break, I'm having a conversation with my friend Jimmy Lawler, who's probably not watching, but it's not impossible that he is, and drummer for the Madeira Brothers, and also the comic actor on one of my CDs. And he has a knack of like trying to say the one thing that will like throw a banana peel in front of you. And he's really good at it. He's got mad skills in that department, right? So we finish a set. We're standing on the dance floor in front of the bandstand. I'm telling him the story, and he looks at me and he says, "Well, Joe, you're the last musician to ever play for Cab Calloway," and he walked away. And I'm standing here on the dance floor, and I kind of just felt like Charlie Brown. He's like, you know, did the football just get pulled away? What just happened? You recognize that music? If you know me, you know that I'm kind of a Vince Guaraldi, Charlie Brown, Peanuts, Charles Schultz file. And that was the Charlie Brown theme. That was the theme that's played whenever Charlie Brown, you know, rats, you know, and so on, as Charlie Brown. So anyway, that was not my punchline. That was a bridge to the really, or a really special part of a special story. So, not so long after, actually a few years, I was at this facility in Delaware for a few years. And then what happens in this realm is that when activity personnel, recreation personnel, like leave and go to someplace else, they take their people with them. And so sometimes when there's a change, you stay on, and sometimes you don't. But then people who go on take you where they are. You know, that was just one of the things about it. So I was kind of on hiatus from this place for maybe a few years, but then I was contacted by somebody who came there who knew me, who was bringing me back. So the week before I'm going back, I'm playing, and I used to do a ton of these gigs at Sullivan's Steakhouse. Before they were duo gigs, I think this one was a solo gig for me. It started out that way. And this was, well, it is still a kind of upscale arm of Lone Star. It's a not a whole lot of them, but they're throughout the country. And their thing, at least when they started, was to have live jazz music every night in the bar, and it was themed to the older stuff. So I was like, it was right up my alley. Okay. So I'm there playing one night, and this couple walks in with a elderly lady in a wheelchair, big smile on her face, big martini glass in her hand, right? And the guy walks up to me because he's going to impress me. He just had that look like, so you're going to be impressed, right? And I don't think he said hello. He didn't say anything. He said, "You know who's sitting in that wheelchair? That's Mrs. Cab Calloway." And the first thing out of my mouth, without thinking, was, "Well, what do you know? I'm the last musician ever to play for her husband." I so loved that I could use that line. But anyhow, then what happened was this nice lady sitting in this chair, tiny little woman. I think the wheelchair was actually too big for her. And with her martini glass in her hand, man, we had like a half hour of bonding. You know, it was just like, I'm playing, she's singing, of course, culture, right? I mean, that's the culture I knew, right? And we were having a grand old time. And then on the break, I talked to her, and I come to find out, and this part I didn't say, that when Cab Calloway was in the health center at this facility, which I may have named by accident. If I did, oh well. You know, she was in independent living. So she was at the same place, although I had not met her. But, you know, the years had done their thing, and now she was in the same place where her husband was. And I found that out, and like I said, I was going back there the very next week for the first time in years. So I had no idea that she was there. So we made a date. And she remembered. And so when I had the group programming, she would be there every week, and she was unlike any of the other residents. Let's put it like that. And she was enthusiastic, and she was the only one, at least at the time. I would play something, and I would take an improvised, solo on it, and everyone else would be there stoically listening, like they were at a classical recital. And she's like, "You go, man, you go, you go." And I'm, how cool is this? So I'm playing something like this, so you can just imagine, the memory I have while I'm playing this of Mrs. Cab Calloway encouraging me on. It was fun. It's only a paper moon. Oh, so what a fun memory for me. And it actually wound up being, as time went on, and it got closer to the end, that I was assigned to her to be her personal or private music therapist. There were a few residents in facilities like this that I would visit individually. So it was just, you know, I'll always say that no matter what size or manner of stage I'll ever play on, or did, or will, or whatever, you know, the most important experiences and the one that means the most to me, I won't say they've already happened, but I mean those experiences are the really special ones, and you know, and that's why I do this. You know, the music therapist part of me, and this is a completely different direction I tend to go, but I'll say it. The music therapist part of me, or the part of me that steered me to it and had me trip over it and find it, is really the part of me that leads in this whole thing. It's about the connection. And it's about, you know, I mean, we all have our egos, and my ego certainly gets in the way all the time. But ultimately, it's about silencing that and reaching the person outside of yourself. And, whoa, in this case, that's you. So, anyway, I'm going to take this idea a little further, move away from the Camp Calloway thing, but give another illustration, because another place where this idea of proving myself happened regularly, and by this time I was really prepared for it, because I've had all these experiences with, you know, the idea of having to, you know, earn my next gig by surviving the gig I was on, kind of thing, is when I got the opportunity to be a walk-on entertainer for American Cruise Lines, which started, I think I got this wrong when I said this last week, I think it was in 2009. And I don't know if it's going to pick up again. You know, things have changed for them, but I'm positive right now, even though they've started cruising just in the last couple of weeks, they're not going to be picking up, you know, entertainers from the ports they go to for a while. But that would be my thing. I would walk on at a designated place, and it was Chestertown, but when they stopped coming there, you know, I guess I was in enough, and they allowed me to drive, you know, and meet them somewhere else. They try to bring performers on from, like, the town they're in, but, you know, there's exceptions for everything. And at the time, you know, that was when I was beginning to grow my hair long. In fact, yeah, that was about the time when it was just starting to not look quite like this, but go in that direction. I guess it was a midlife crisis thing or whatever, you know, approach 50 years old and see if you can do this because you never did it before, and then it's become my thing. Or as my youngest son said to me some years ago, once people get to know you, your hair's kind of like your mascot. And, you know, I finally started doing the ponytail thing just out of self-defense, because it was just about 6 years ago. But it's like, you know, once I cut it, it's not going to come back like that. And it's like, I'm just keeping it. It's my mascot, right? But anyway, so I knew that I'm coming on the American Cruise Lines boats, and in the past, it is changing now. But then it was kind of like a floating retirement community, but it wasn't actually a retirement community. But it was those age residents. I mean, those age passengers. You know, because it's people who have like money to spend. These are not inexpensive cruises, and they're geared to the taste of seniors and people who can just take off during the week and do their thing. And sometimes they do multiple cruises, and a lot of them do. But I'm walking in there. Nobody's met me before. I'm going to be the entertainer for the evening, And I'm reluctant to say what I'm going to play. I'll say jazz if I have to, but the idea of jazz is problematic. And because some people say I don't like it. And my thing is just I need to get in there, I need to play for them, and then I can win them over. That sounds, but I knew how to do it. That was my job every week, to like climb that mountain each time, or several times a week, whenever I did it. So I walk in there, and I was too young, and I had the long hair. That was actually an issue in the retirement community. One of the retirement communities I continued to go to after the hair got long. This is like, oh, well, no. And then I get in anyway, but it's another obstacle. And I began to kind of enjoy that, because it was just like, well, here's that recurring theme showing up again, right? So I would go in there, and they would all be suspicious of me, but there was no other activity planned for that night, so they showed up thinking they might leave after 5 minutes, and they didn't. And it took me a few tunes, because I'm not one of these guys who like, flashy and like whoa, it's like build that connection over time. And we'll talk about that. I got some good advice from somebody once who's in the business, talking about like first tune you do this, second tune you do this, by third tune you have them, right? And that's kind of how it worked. But so they would be surprised. Here's a tune I would always start with when I started this. So they were probably surprised to see me and then hear this come out of me. and so it kind of works out, and I don't expect this to happen at least every week, probably not much at all. But it happens now that neatly tie in to last week, because my thing about playing music for you is to connect with you. You being you, but you being whoever's out there also. And I can't not see that. I know that there are playing musicians who they have their craft, they have their thing, they look at it like it's the masterpiece painting in the museum, and people are free to get it or not get it, and they could care less because they're, comfortable with the value of the artistic expression and all of that. And that's a thing. And last week we talked about, or I did, wide angle lenses or narrow lenses. And the wide angle lens cannot not see you. And so that's a piece of this. The earning my keep, is, the success of the gig is did it work? Did it connect? And I'm always aware of that. So I'm going to play one more tune and just leave the theme or the punchline here, that I'm always aware of the potential connection and the opportunity when I'm sitting down playing someplace, particularly for the first time, to consider myself one of us once I earn it. get a chance to walk around in a second and see if anyone is still watching. I trust that you are. If you're watching, you're still watching. Circular anyway. So thanks so much, and if you're inclined to visit my website and lend support, particularly if you like this and want to help me continue it, because even as things start to get busier, and it's actually become pretty challenging already with the different projects I've been involved in, I really want to keep this going, and your support helps me do that. So thanks so much. I will make events for next week for the Tuesday night stream and the Escape from Home Piano Hour, and then this. And I'll hope to see you then, and hope to see you in person sometime soon too. Thanks so much.